Harry's only contribution is to get together with his rich mates who fly in from all over the world in their private jets and play polo while swilling champagne at very exclusive settings. Why? What is this all about? She said that it just doesn't feel right.
The court case has finished its evidence phase, and the judge is now writing the judgment. What the proceedings have left behind, the Charlotte Griffith messages, the Gavin Burrows repudiation, and the judge telling the claimant to calm down and answer the questions, all combine into a very specific picture of how Harry understands journalism and why that understanding is fundamentally wrong. Harry's theory of the press, as it has appeared through years of public statements and now through his own testimony, is essentially this. Journalists get stories about celebrities through illegitimate means. They hack phones, hire private investigators, bug cars, and rely on deception and technical intrusion.
The flow of information happens. Now, part of the Mail's contention was, we have journalists, and we have journalists who penetrated Harry's social circle. They got information in that way. Harry said, absolutely not. No, that has never happened. None of my friends have ever said anything to the newspapers ever, and I have never made friends with newspaper journalists.
In Harry's view, the stories that appeared about him, the ones he never wanted in print, could only have come from methods like these, because his friends and associates would never have spoken to journalists, and no legitimate journalistic process could have produced that information. This theory has remained consistent for years. It was the basis of his legal action against the News of the World in earlier proceedings, and it is the basis of this action against associated newspapers. It is deeply embedded in the way he has spoken about the press, portraying journalists as people who gather in meetings, decide who their targets will be, and then pursue those targets through surveillance and technical intrusion. That theory is incorrect. That does not mean press intrusion never happened. It did happen. The phone hacking scandal was real, serious, and deeply damaging, and it produced genuine legal and institutional consequences. But the idea that this is how newspapers routinely work as a matter of standard practice, and that Harry's troubles with the press have mainly been caused by systematic illegal targeting of this sort, does not hold up. Journalists were getting stories people wanted hidden long before telephones existed, long before mobile phones, and certainly long before hacking scandals entered the public imagination.
Messages between Prince Harry and Charlotte Griffith so funny. I was rolling in my bed laughing. G-string, sugar, movie snuggles. Is Meghan Markle okay today?
I would say probably things are not too cool at Montecito Towers.
The actual mechanism is much less dramatic. It is relationship. It is proximity. It is the cultivation of sources who know things. It is the building of contacts in the social circles of the people being reported on. It is the slow, patient gathering of information from willing sources rather than the technical espionage Harry's theory depends on. Charlotte Griffith's testimony, together with the messages that supported it in documentary form, shows exactly how this works. She moved within Harry's social circles. She attended the same parties. She was invited to the same country house weekends. She and Harry exchanged messages warmly and flirtatiously over a period of months, showing that a real social connection existed between them. Through that connection, she learned things she could later report. That did not require phone hacking. It did not require private investigators. It required being where Harry was, knowing the people he knew, and being the kind of journalist who is skilled at building and maintaining relationships that produce information. There is nothing extraordinary about that. It is journalism. It has functioned like this for as long as the profession has existed. Harry's inability to understand this, his repeated belief that the only possible way information could move from his private life into print was through illegal conduct, reveals a deep misunderstanding of how the press actually works. That misunderstanding also reflects something important about Harry's background. He grew up in an environment where the line between his private life and the public record was managed by a huge institutional machine. Palace press offices, security teams, communications directors, and all the other people around him existed partly to create and defend that boundary. Harry's experience of privacy was therefore the experience of someone surrounded by powerful institutional protection. When information got through despite all of that, the explanation that must have felt natural to him was that the system had been breached illegally, because illegal breach was the only way such protection was supposed to fail. The reality was different. That protection was never perfect and never could be perfect, because private information moves through people. It moves through friends who talk, through associates who observe, and through the ordinary social world Harry himself occupied, where the people around him were also potential sources of information about him. That does not always happen through malice. It does not always happen through betrayal in the dramatic sense. Much of the time it happens through the normal, everyday process by which human beings share what they know with other human beings, some of whom happen to be journalists.
Trackers on a car, no, proof of any sort of phone hacking in this particular case. But we now have, proof of the opposite, that while he says he didn't have a relationship with this person, there's a clear thread, a very friendly conversation between two people.
Katie Nicholl is a particularly useful example of how this misunderstanding becomes damaging to Harry himself. She is one of the most respected royal journalists in the world. She has covered Harry and Meghan with seriousness and fairness that many observers on both sides of the Sussex argument have acknowledged. She has defended the couple when she believed criticism of them was unfair, and she has challenged them when she believed challenge was deserved. By any sensible standard, she is a journalist of integrity doing careful work. Yet she was dragged into Harry's court case under the shadow of an implied allegation that her journalism had been obtained through illegal methods. She denied it. She was not found to have done anything wrong, but being accused, in effect, of questionable professional conduct in the highest court in the country by a claimant whose own credibility is now under pressure is not something that can simply be erased by whatever verdict eventually comes. The allegation existed. The professional difficulty was created. It was created not because Katie Nicholl hacked anyone's phone, but because Harry's theory of journalism required her to have done something like that. This is one of the specific harms caused by Harry's approach to the press. It has not only failed to hold genuinely corrupt journalists accountable, it has also exposed respected journalists who did nothing wrong to the degradation of legal suspicion and public speculation over their methods. That is not an argument against legitimate press accountability cases. It is an argument against press accountability actions built on a false theory of how journalism actually functions. When the theory itself is wrong, the damage spreads beyond the intended target. People who are simply doing their jobs in ordinary, lawful ways get caught in a narrative that casts them as conspirators. The problem is not only that the legal case becomes weak, it is that the weakness produces collateral harm. What makes this especially striking is that the evidence itself points in the other direction. Charlotte Griffith's messages show access, familiarity, and social presence. They show the exact kind of relationship-based reporting that explains how a journalist might know things about Harry without ever touching a phone, planting a bug, or hiring an investigator. Once that reality is visible, the legal theory starts to look not merely overstated but structurally flawed. If a journalist was at the parties, in the circles, and in the rooms where the story was developing, then the presence of information in print no longer needs an illegal explanation. The ordinary explanation is enough. That is the central problem. Harry appears unable, or unwilling, to accept that stories can emerge through normal human contact. He has held on to the belief that unwanted stories must come from criminal or illegitimate methods because he cannot imagine the people around him as the source. Yet that is precisely how journalism has so often worked, especially in elite social worlds. The people closest to the story are the people who know it. The people who know it are the people who talk. The journalist who listens, remembers, builds trust, and remains present is the one who gets the story. That reality may be uncomfortable, but discomfort does not turn lawful journalism into illegality. It only means the private sphere was more porous than Harry believed. His institutional upbringing encouraged the illusion that privacy could be fully controlled and that any failure of that control must be evidence of criminal breach. The evidence presented in this case points somewhere else. It points toward the simple fact that private lives leak through relationships, social overlap, and conversation. That is not scandalous in itself. It is the basic operating reality of reporting. Seen in that light, the court case leaves behind something larger than the question of one legal verdict. It leaves behind a portrait of a man whose view of the press was shaped by grievance, institutional insulation, and a mistaken assumption about how information travels. It also leaves behind the sight of respected journalists having their integrity drawn into question because that mistaken assumption had to be defended in court. The judge may soon rule on the specific claims before him, but the proceedings have already exposed the broader flaw. Harry's understanding of journalism is not merely incomplete. It is built on a misunderstanding so deep that it turns ordinary reporting into imagined conspiracy and lawful source building into presumed illegality.
This year, but he's only willing to come if he gets the security that he would require, which is automatic armed security, so because that's the only way he'll bring Meghan and the kids. Even though it's like, it doesn't work that way, Kevin. If you tell Ravik you're bringing Meghan and the kids, you will likely get that security. It's not, yep. I will only bring Meghan and the kids if I get that security.
The Sandringham situation has a specific constitutional dimension that has not been properly examined in the wider coverage. Harry's demand, or hope, or expectation, depending on which version of the Sunday Times briefing seems most credible, is that the king should provide or arrange an enhanced security package that would make a family visit to Sandringham possible on Harry's terms. The implied argument is simple. If the king wants to see his grandchildren, then he has the power to make the arrangements that would allow that to happen. But that is not true, at least not in the specific form Harry is asking for. Ravik, the body that decides security arrangements for members of the royal family, is a government committee. It operates independently of the king's personal wishes.
The king cannot constitutionally be seen to get involved in any way in what Ravik decides. He cannot say to them, hey, listen, Harry wants to see the kids, so could you swing it so he gets this gun guard security from the police that he keeps asking for? The king can't do that. It would be unconstitutional.
The king cannot constitutionally direct Ravik to give Harry a specific security package in order to make a family visit happen. He may be the nominal head of the institution within which Ravik exists, but he does not attend its meetings and he cannot instruct it in individual cases without creating a constitutional problem. It would look like he was using his position to benefit a family member in a way that the committee's independent judgment had not approved. That is the distinction Harry, through his briefing to the Sunday Times and through the wider framing of his Sandringham bid, has been deliberately obscuring. The briefing creates the impression that the king could solve this simply by wanting to, that the obstacle is a failure of will rather than a real constitutional limit. That is not accurate. Placing that impression into the public domain and creating the image of a grandfather who is choosing not to see his grandchildren, when the actual situation is far more complicated, is a very specific kind of manipulation. The king, meanwhile, is battling cancer. He is dealing with the Sandringham issue while also managing his health, the Andrew investigation, the state visit to America, and the full burden of institutional leadership at a difficult moment. He cannot constitutionally provide what Harry is asking for, and he cannot honestly pretend that he simply chose not to. Yet the narrative being planted, that of a grandfather refusing to invite his grandchildren, depends on the public believing that the problem is the king's will rather than the constitutional structure within which he operates. That is where the real cruelty of the move sits. It is also why multiple credible observers have described it as blackmail, not in the formal legal sense, but as the deliberate construction of a public narrative designed to exploit a dying father's longing for his grandchildren in order to create pressure for an outcome that cannot constitutionally or practically be delivered in the way Harry wants. William, Camilla, and, by all available evidence, most of the rest of the royal family understand exactly what is happening. They have seen this pattern before. They have seen private conversations turn into public material. They have seen private moments become memoir passages and private family interactions become documentary scenes. Individually, and apparently together, they have reached the conclusion that they do not trust Harry in a private setting. Not because they hate him, but because documented experience has taught them that private interactions do not stay private. That is what broken trust looks like when it becomes complete. It is not dramatic confrontation. It is quiet separation, witnesses in the room, a refusal to be alone with someone, and a decision not to extend invitations that could create another private interaction later turned into another public disclosure. That same problem now appears in another area entirely: Netflix. Reporting this week, attributed to Paula Froelich of NewsNation, says Netflix will no longer allow Harry and Meghan to work on projects without supervision. Any future creative collaboration will involve Netflix personnel overseeing development and execution in ways the earlier, more independent arrangement did not. If that is accurate, it is an extraordinary signal of institutional mistrust from a commercial partner. Netflix does not normally manage its talent in this way. Streaming platforms usually work with celebrities on the basis of some degree of creative trust, because they believe the people attached to a project have something valuable to offer and can be relied upon to deliver it. Supervision of the type being described is the language of a company that has been burned and is now protecting itself from being burned again. The projects most often cited as underperforming, Live to Lead, Heart of Invictus, and the Polo documentary, help explain what went wrong. None of them captured the level of audience engagement Netflix needed from its investment in the Sussex brand. Each one disappointed commercially in ways that a publicly traded company with shareholders could not simply ignore. The Polo documentary is especially worth examining, not only because a Polo drama has now been announced in similar territory, but because the reasons that documentary struggled reveal something important about the basic limitations of the Sussex commercial operation. Polo is an elite sport. Its audience is small, wealthy, and concentrated in very particular markets. The world it represents, extreme privilege, exclusive social circles, and rich people pursuing an expensive hobby, does not naturally connect with the mass audience Netflix is trying to reach. None of this was hidden before the documentary was made. It was obvious long before a camera was switched on. Still, the documentary was made, presumably because Polo matters deeply to Harry. It is part of his identity, his social world, and his sense of himself. The project gave him a chance to share something he genuinely loves. That impulse is understandable, but a sincere creative impulse and commercial good judgment are not the same thing. The Centibale charity side of the Polo story adds another layer. Sophie Chandaka, the charity's former director, who spoke about this in Tom Bauer's book, described a discomfort with the Polo fundraising model that becomes difficult to dismiss once stated clearly. The charity exists to support children in southern Africa who have been orphaned or affected by HIV and AIDS. Its work takes place in conditions of real poverty and deprivation. The people it serves are among the most vulnerable anywhere. Yet the main fundraising model involves wealthy polo players flying to Florida on private jets, playing an elite sport the charity's beneficiaries have never heard of, drinking champagne at exclusive venues, and congratulating themselves on their philanthropy. That contrast felt wrong to her, and it is easy to understand why. The juxtaposition of extreme privilege performing charity on behalf of extreme poverty sends an uncomfortable message. Harry, according to Bauer's account, was shocked and upset by that criticism. He apparently had not considered that a model which allowed him to do what he loved while also doing good might look completely different from the perspective of the people the charity was supposed to help. That is a small moment, but a revealing one. It shows the gap between Harry's self-image as someone doing meaningful work and the way that work can appear from the outside. It is the same gap that appears in the court case. It is the same gap that appears in the Sandringham maneuver. It is the recurring pattern of a man who genuinely believes in his own image, yet repeatedly fails to account for how the space between that image and observable reality looks to other people. The newly announced Polo drama may, or may not ever be made. By several accounts, the announcement itself was timed to create a counter-narrative to reporting about Sussex operational failures in Hollywood. Its commercial logic remains questionable for the same reasons the Polo documentary's logic was questionable. If the project does move forward, it will likely do so under this new model of Netflix supervision, with direct oversight replacing the creative independence the earlier deal was supposed to provide. That is where the Sussex relationship with Hollywood now stands. Conditional, supervised, and commercially cautious. It is not the sweeping success once promised. It is not the independent creative powerhouse that leaving the royal family was meant to unlock. It is something smaller, more conditional, and far more dependent on the goodwill of partners who have already been disappointed than the original headline numbers ever suggested. The same structural problem keeps appearing. The commodity that was sold has not delivered the value it promised. The buyers are adjusting accordingly, and the Sussex operation is left managing the consequences while still seeming to believe that the next announcement will change the direction. It will not. The direction cannot be changed through announcements. It can only be changed through delivered value, through projects that genuinely work, content that actually reaches people, and products that audiences really want. That is the problem at the center of everything now. That trajectory cannot be changed by announcements. It can only be changed by delivered value, by projects that actually work, content that genuinely connects with audiences, and commercial products that people truly want to buy. Delivered value demands the kind of real creative and commercial engagement the Sussex operation has not shown consistently. That is where things now stand. The court verdict is still coming. The Netflix supervision model is reportedly in place. The Australia retreat is approaching. The Sandringham bid has been declined. The story is moving forward, not toward the dramatic reckoning some people expected, but toward something quieter and perhaps more revealing. The reckoning of an operation that promised more than it has delivered and is now living with the consequences of that gap. The distance between promise and delivery is, in the end, the real story of the Sussex era in Hollywood. The conference room in Australia, the supervised Netflix development arrangement, and the Charlotte Griffith messages in the High Court are all, in different ways, expressions of that same divide. That brings the focus back to the journalism question, because Harry's misunderstanding of how the press works has consequences far beyond his own legal case. The phone hacking scandal that produced the Leveson inquiry and the closure of the News of the World was real. It was a serious violation of journalistic ethics and law. Real journalists at real newspapers hacked real phones and obtained private information illegally. That happened. It was wrong. It was prosecuted. People went to prison, and the press regulatory framework changed because of it. Those are facts. The mistake Harry appears to have made was drawing from that scandal a much broader lesson than the facts support. He seems to believe that this is how newspapers routinely operate, that any story about him he did not want published must have been obtained unlawfully, and that the proper response to unwelcome coverage is legal action built on an assumption of illegality. That is a dramatic overgeneralization from one specific scandal. Most journalists at most newspapers, most of the time, are not hacking phones or hiring private investigators. They are doing what Charlotte Griffith did. They build relationships, attend events, maintain contacts in the social circles they cover, and gather information through the ordinary human process of being where the stories are. Harry's inability, or unwillingness, to accept that basic fact has led him into a pattern of legal action built on the wrong premise. If the information was not obtained illegally, if Charlotte Griffith knew what she knew because she was at parties with Harry rather than because she hacked his phone, then the theory of the case fails regardless of how forcefully it is argued. A judge cannot find in favor of a claimant on an allegation of illegal hacking when the evidence shows that the journalist in question was present in the same rooms, the same parties, and the same social network as the person being written about. That is the central weakness now visible in the case, and the Charlotte Griffith messages made it visible in a dramatic way. Those messages show that Griffith was part of Harry's social world. They show the connection that explains how she came to know what she knew. By proving that connection, they weaken the idea that phone hacking had to be the explanation. Katie Nichols' situation is worth lingering on because it shows the collateral damage caused by a bad legal theory. She is a journalist who has covered Harry and Meghan carefully and has defended them when she believed criticism was unfair. She does not fit the image of a reporter pursuing targets through illegal means. She fits the image of a careful professional who spent years cultivating sources and relationships in the royal world and using them to inform her reporting. Yet Harry's legal action, because it rests on the belief that unwanted information could only have reached print through illegal means, inevitably pulled Nichols into its orbit. Her name enters proceedings. Her methods come under implied suspicion, even if she is not the central focus. The mere suggestion that she might have obtained information unlawfully, even when not directly stated, still attaches itself to her professional reputation in a way that is unfair and unjustified. That is a specific harm, and it does not appear to be one Harry fully considered before bringing the case. The damage done to people like Nichols was not weighed against the value of holding actual wrongdoing to account. It was simply an unavoidable outcome of the theory he chose to pursue. Another issue now deserves attention: the Netflix Polo drama announcement. Both its timing and its substance require more scrutiny than they have received. The announcement came, as many observers noted, immediately after the Variety piece about Sussex operational failures in Hollywood. That Variety reporting was damaging, sourced, specific, and backed by a publication with the legal and editorial strength to stand behind what it published. The sudden appearance of a new Netflix drama announcement in the middle of that news cycle follows a familiar pattern. Negative coverage arrives, and then an announcement about upcoming projects appears in other outlets, designed to create a counter-narrative of momentum, creativity, and commercial life. The specific project announced, a drama set in the polo world, suffers from the same commercial problems that hurt the earlier Polo documentary. Polo does not carry mass audience appeal. Its cultural associations remain tied to a narrow and highly privileged social world. A drama set in Florida's polo scene, even if made by capable television creators, begins with a built-in commercial disadvantage that enthusiasm and production value alone may not overcome. The Meet Me at the Lake situation is useful here as well. Harry and Meghan announced the acquisition of rights to that book some time ago. The announcement itself generated headlines and created the impression of a meaningful creative pipeline. But the film has not been made. The announcement was more visible than the actual project. That is the pattern. The polo drama announcement may be simply the latest version of it. The announcement serves an immediate purpose by pushing back against negative coverage and giving defenders of the Sussex operation something to point to. Whether the drama ever reaches production is a separate matter. The available evidence suggests that, within the Sussex creative operation, the relationship between announcement and production is not especially reliable. The reported supervision model, where Netflix directly oversees future Sussex projects rather than leaving them to the principal's independent judgment, is itself a response to that pattern. Netflix appears to have concluded that the Sussex pipeline from announcement to finished product does not consistently produce commercially viable content, and that stronger oversight is needed to protect its investment. That is not a sign of confidence in their creative autonomy. It is the opposite. If the polo drama is made under this arrangement, and if it is made at all, it will be shaped by Netflix executives and experienced producers who see the Sussex name as a piece of commercial leverage and will use it according to what they believe best serves the project, not what best serves the Sussex narrative or brand. That arrangement may produce a stronger drama than the Sussex operation would have produced alone. It may also lead to no drama at all. If experienced television professionals decide that even the Sussex name attached to a polo drama is not enough to justify the investment, then Harry and Meghan become, in this scenario, what they once claimed the royal family made them: names attached to projects rather than genuine creative drivers of those projects. The irony is considerable. They left the royal family partly because they did not want to remain ceremonial figureheads whose names carried weight, while their real influence remained limited. Under the reported terms of their current Netflix relationship, they may now be in much the same position. Their names still hold some commercial value, though reduced from their peak, and Netflix will use that value while keeping the creative and operational control that the track record of Sussex projects has persuaded it is necessary. This is not the independent creative powerhouse they were supposed to become after leaving royal life. It is simply another kind of institutional dependence, not on the monarchy, but on a streaming platform that has lost confidence in their ability to execute and is now managing them accordingly. In that sense, the polo world becomes the perfect metaphor. It is a sport played by privileged people who love it and who have convinced themselves that playing it, enjoying it, and building events around it amount to a meaningful contribution to the world. To those inside it, it looks like important activity. To those outside it, it can look like something very different. That is exactly what Sophie Chandaka meant when she said it did not feel right as a vehicle for charity. The same question now hangs over Harry's post-royal life more broadly. Do these activities truly serve the purposes they claim to serve, or do they primarily serve Harry himself, giving him a sense of identity, meaning, and continuation after losing the role that once defined him? The court case, the Sandringham bid, the Washington speech, and the polo drama can all be understood either as sincere attempts at important work or as part of a larger effort to construct a meaningful identity after the original one fell away. The truth is probably not completely one thing or the other. Genuine impulse and self-serving construction can exist together, and in Harry's case they seem to. What is slowly being revealed, though, is which element now dominates. When the commercial system that was meant to sustain independence begins to fail, when platform deals weaken, publishers step back, and Netflix introduces direct supervision, the question becomes unavoidable. What remains? What is the real contribution once the large promises are stripped away? The polo grounds in Florida offer one answer. The conference room in Australia offers another. The High Court testimony about Charlotte Griffith offers a third. The judge writing his judgment over Easter will soon offer one more. There is one final thread that matters here. Hugo Vickers' revelation that Queen Elizabeth would not take Harry's calls without a witness present. That detail has been discussed before, but in light of everything now emerging, it deserves repeating. It connects the royal family's specific loss of trust in Harry to the broader pattern of how relationships in this story have changed. The Queen, known throughout her reign for being willing to engage personally and privately with those she loved and led, reached a point in the last years of her life where she felt she could not speak to her grandson alone. She asked her lady-in-waiting to be there. She needed a witness. Not because she did not love Harry, but because love was no longer enough to overcome the fear that private conversations might later become public in ways she had not agreed to. That is extraordinary. The head of state, the most experienced constitutional monarch in British history, and a grandmother all at once, needed a witness when her grandson called. Camilla appears to have adopted the same approach more openly. When Harry visited Charles in London, she reportedly insisted on being in the room. She was not there for the warmth of reunion. She was there as a witness, as protection, as someone who would know exactly what had been said if another version later appeared elsewhere. That is what a trust deficit looks like in practical human terms. It is not always total estrangement. It can be something more painful than that. Continued contact, but managed contact. Conversations that cannot happen without safeguards because the person involved has shown that private moments may become public material. Harry presents himself as a truth-teller unfairly persecuted by an institution that cannot handle honesty. He may sincerely believe that the genuineness of his self-image is not really in doubt. He appears to believe the disclosures were necessary, that the institution needed to be challenged, and that he was the one meant to do it. What he does not seem to have fully reckoned with is what those disclosures did to every private interaction that came after them. Every conversation turned into a book passage, every family meeting turned into a documentary scene, every private call turned into material for public narrative. Each one damages trust a little more. Once enough of those moments accumulate and everyone in the family understands what private contact may lead to, the response becomes entirely predictable. The witness in the room, the lady-in-waiting on the call, the family members who no longer want to be alone with him. Harry went to court to hold the press accountable for the trust violations he believed had been committed against him. While doing so, He has also been living through the consequences of the trust violations he committed against his own family. That parallel is plain enough for anyone prepared to look at it honestly. The judge will rule on the press case eventually. The family relationships will continue to be managed through the safeguards their loss of trust now requires. The story will move forward, though toward what final outcome, and on what timescale, is still unknown. What is known is this: a grandson whose grandmother needed a witness when he called, a son whose stepmother insists on being present for private talks, a brother convinced that anything said in confidence may later become content, and a father dying of cancer, while being maneuvered through press briefings about grandchildren and security. This is what destroyed trust looks like in a family. Not loud, not theatrical, quiet, managed, and deeply sad. Witnesses in rooms, ladies in waiting on calls, security used as leverage. Sandringham bids floated through the Sunday Times, and somewhere in Montecito, a man who left an institution because he believed it was failing him, who built his post-royal life on the idea that telling his truth was worth the cost, now waiting for a court verdict and for an invitation that is not coming.